tell you the truth, guys, before I watched this episode, it gave me a prediction that this episode was mainly a correction of what Lincoln went through in episodes previous. Mainly the episodes that I talked about in the Broken Character Development of Lincoln Loud video that I've uploaded last August. And upon watching this entire episode from beginning to end, it still gave me what I expected, but at the same time, it also had problems and missed opportunities. But let's get into the plot. Rita is assigned to do a travel article, so she takes her entire family, and the first stop is Niagara Falls, where the barrel race is taking place, which is what Jesse Miller wants a story out of. But Lincoln notices Dr. Wieldsley's Bizarritorium is on the way to their destination, so Lincoln pleaded Rita to go there. Only if they have enough time, that is. During the first half of the episode, Lincoln makes sure to be way ahead of time in order to get to the Bizarritorium with more time to spare. He changes the clocks an hour ahead of time. He moves all of the luggage from his sisters and family inside of the RV. When the Louds go to a restroom during the trip, since that they can't be able to use the restroom inside the RV because of Lynn Jr., obviously, Lincoln told the people in line that aren't his sisters that those pancakes on someone else's car because Lynn Saw had the window open while doing pancakes, considering that Lincoln also let Lynn Saw to know that he can make breakfast on the road. Unfortunately, the Bizarritorium has been out of business, and Lincoln notices that there was the royal reign of royalty that was part of a mummy that he saw on the video, and he takes it with him thinking it's a good luck charm, only it's mainly the opposite. And you can really tell where you're getting these vibes from, but we're gonna get to that much soon. If you saw my community tap post that I made this morning, I stated that the family was ganging up on Lincoln, which they somewhat did in this episode, but I also mentioned that this episode took translation from one of the worst Loud Tales episodes into its own thing. Granted, I worded that out completely odd, but judging the fact that I made that Lincoln Loud video last August, and now we have a Lincoln Loud episode that centers around him messing something up, it really feels like that this episode just toned it down for literally making Lincoln a lot more relatable. Well, obviously relatable, but also having him deal with less suffering. The relatability is mainly him wanting to go to a place that is roadside attraction only. And to be perfectly real with you, I know roadside attractions are really a lot more exclusive instead of just being exclusive to being part of a shop like Walmart or anything else. So it kind of makes sense for Lincoln to go to a place like Dr. Wheatley's Bizarritorium. And when it comes to the less suffering, to be perfectly real with you, when we witness the second half of this episode where it includes fantasy elements, usually I would probably critique onto why, but the only critiques that I have is that if it's going to include something fantasy related, they really need to put more focus on Dr. Wieldsley and his Bizarritorium, because the only thing that we get involving the Bizarritorium is mainly the video that Lincoln showed to his family. Unfortunately, we don't get any information about him, the Bizarritorium, and the fact that the Wayne is possessed. And to be perfectly real with you, if they only did this because this video happened a long time ago, and they wanted to do inspiration by making Dr. Wield as Uncle Stan from Gravity Falls, it somewhat worked, but at the same time, you really need to do a lot more in order to make these elements as major plot devices for the story. And the fact that the royal reign of royalty that Lincoln found and took while the building was completely confiscated. It's bad luck. It's extremely bad luck, which leads to the fantasy elements, and I honestly don't understand how most of this works when we don't get any information. Like, the information that we get is that Lucy is trying to reverse the curse that Lincoln has, but at the same time, since that the second half of the episode is just showcasing bad luck due to the royal reign of royalty in Lincoln's possession, it would make sense to blame Lincoln for all this, but the thing is, he did know that the reign was cursed, and to be perfectly real with you, this is somewhat inspirational from Bad Clock from the Cross-Dragon days when Sergio just killed a rooster while taking his glasses and pooping on his car. And obviously the inspiration that people will probably remember the most is that the bad luck nature in this is similar to No Such Luck, except that they take bad luck legitimately seriously in this episode. But to tell you the truth, since that I've stated that Bizarritorium were translating ideas from bad episodes, making them into Bizarritorium's its own thing, it gave me the impression that they were trying to do the opposite of what No Such Luck was doing. Mainly, there was no bad luck whatsoever, and the characters were extremely unlikable, while in Bizarritorium, it's the opposite. Well, there is bad luck, and the Loud Sisters, while gaining up on Lincoln when they found out the truth, aren't unlikable, but there's a problem that I have with them, which I'm gonna get to later, and it has nothing to do with them gaining up on Lincoln. You see, the thing is, it really feels like that they took ideas from most episodes and translate them into Bizarritorium to be its own thing. Like, Lincoln gaining the reign from the Bizarritorium that is out of business is somewhat similar to him and Clyde capturing the evil Kitty in order to do the plan their way. Granted, there was a huge difference of Lincoln and Clyde's motivations in Kings of the Con, but when it comes to Bizarritorium, since that Lincoln didn't know that the reign was possessed or cursed, I'm starting to get the impression that they want to put the focus on rewriting the wrongs of what happened in the past, even though it sacrificed major plot points, like the Dr. Wieldy and his Bizarritorium, for example. But this is also why I lead to the problem with the characters that aren't Lincoln. They don't do much other than being mostly plot devices for Lincoln to go through, and the thing is that when you literally have these characters not hateable as they were in one of the worst episodes, but you don't do much of them other than just being plot devices for Lincoln to go through, it really feels like that they just didn't know what to do with the other characters in this. Like, I understand that this episode centers around Lincoln, but even in No Such Luck, at the very least, as much as the characters were unlikable, they at least did something. Granted, that's the only positive I will ever give No Such Luck, but that doesn't automatically give it points. My point is that even though that this episode is focusing on Lincoln, the bad luck nature going on around him and the family, it's really weird that the Lau family isn't really concerned on what is really going on. Like, they did later on when Lincoln confessed, not really confessed, but when Lola, being a tattletale as usual, called Lincoln out for stealing away from the Bizarritorium, but they're unfazed. And believe me, in the later seasons after the Loud sisters and family were slightly likable, they were fully aware of what is really going on, and the fact that they went through down-to-earth elements a lot more seriously, and they don't take fantasy elements seriously or what is really going on, it's either they forgot about bad luck from No Such Luck, or the fact that this episode is retconning No Such Luck by making it non-canon. Either that, it could be a good choice, but the way I see it, it really feels like they either did a good choice, but also a bad choice, judging of how the characters don't take fantasy elements seriously. And when they do take it seriously, it's mainly for the sake of plot. it's really difficult to take most of this seriously when they're being made to be taken seriously. Which, in all honesty, why the fantasy elements that caused by Lincoln didn't make me convinced that Lincoln was the bad guy in all this, because even though I said, oh, yo, he didn't know what was going on, but at the same time, with all this randomness happening so much, this is actually better in comparison to all the bad stuff that Lincoln went through, especially since that in some occasions, while he did something terrible, it somewhat justify the punishment that he gets. It's still difficult to take itself seriously because if this was all exclusive towards Lucy, it would somewhat make sense considering that she is familiar with all this stuff. And after the many times we've seen her deal with fantasy elements, especially since that she has somewhat of a focus in the Loud House movie, it honestly feels sad that she didn't get a 22-minute episode. Like, at this point, the only thing that people would probably be thankful if this episode didn't focus on Lincoln and making Lincoln getting the blame or basically becoming the punching bag as usual is having Lucy as the main character in order to understand the meaning of curses. But she is too much of an expert on any of the stuff that she went through when it comes to rituals and whatnot. Another problem that I have with this episode is that similar to the Loud House movie, Lincoln had to carry the entire episode, which in this is a lot more simpler in comparison to the Loud House movie, but that doesn't make anything better since I've always stated about the sisters' motivations in this and being used for plot devices. Like, I'm not complaining on the fact that the others aren't willing to help Lincoln heading to the Bizarritorium as fast as possible, but when Lincoln is literally doing all this by pushing the luggages of his sisters inside the RV, you can really tell that he wasn't thinking about himself. Granted, he wanted to go to the Bizarritorium, but at the same time, him going there and also getting the Wayne, he wasn't being greedy or selfish. And to be perfectly real with you, whenever I think about Lincoln in this episode in comparison to the other episodes, they instantly tried to make him likable, and yet at the same time have to make him carry the entire episode, which isn't a good thing when the other characters don't do much other than becoming plot devices. And I think the biggest missed opportunity of them all in this episode is the fact that Rita isn't really much of a main character in this, while Lincoln takes most of the screen time. Since we saw the synopsis involving this episode, you will probably expect that this episode would center around Rita and Lincoln, since that it focuses on her article on doing a report or a column involving the barrelways at Niagara Falls. And when it involves a bumpy start involving a Lincoln situation, you would think that Lincoln sabotaged the road trip by going to the Bizarritorium, which is in a different direction than the direction that Rita needs to take, which would make Lincoln extremely unlikable. And to be perfectly honest, that would have been similar to Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul, and even though the direction of this episode took is questionable, at least it didn't talk that route. Even if we won't be able to have a 22-minute episode involving Lucy, a 22-minute episode involving Lincoln and Rita isn't really a bad alternative. The thing is that even though that Rita is a little bit more important than the other characters, it doesn't change the fact that her motivations is just focusing on the barrel race in Niagara Falls by doing a column revolving around that, which is important since that's part of her job. It's honestly baffling on the fact that she isn't the main focus of this episode while Lincoln does most of the screen time. Believe me when I say this, if you were mostly upset on the fact when you see the synopsis before this episode came out that it will involve Lincoln sabotaging something, I would probably be concerned about that, and when this episode came out, it wasn't the case, but since that Rita isn't the main character, it's honestly a win-lose situation, since that we didn't get what we were feared, but at the same time, we didn't get anything better out of it. Let's get into the reveal of Lincoln having the win. which leads to everyone ganging up on him. Since that the only punishment they gave to him is that while setting up for the ritual, they have him lay down on the ground by being folded into toilet paper, which is not wanted when it comes to the ritual. It's literally the only punishment that Lincoln gets in this entire episode. You know, if it's the punishment that Lin Jr. has been using all the toilet paper, it doesn't change the fact that the toilet paper wasn't used yet. But for how Lucy told Lincoln that it's payback for putting bad luck on the family, in comparison to the ending of No Such Luck, where he was forced to wear a squirrel mascot costume on the beach, which was really hot inside, it really feels like that Lucy is saying, we got nothing else to punish you, but that's mainly the fact that we don't want you to suffer anymore, so we gave you the laziest suffering, even if it may be triggersome. But at the same time, we think that the bad luck here was a lot more severe compared to the bad luck that you gave us 6 years ago. Well, you told us that you have bad luck even though you were lying. Granted, it made awkward sense to phrase it that way, but in comparison to how they were portrayed in the earlier seasons, mainly in Brawl in the Family, well, they were a lot more severe by taking things a lot more seriously over the most insignificant thing. It really feels like that if you do the opposite by making things a lot more complicated while making the characters less angry, it kind of makes sense, but in a confusing and bizarre way, which, judging by the title of this episode, it actually made sense. If you ask me, the way Lincoln is executed in this episode, nothing has changed, but it's mainly that the characters have a different role reversal or a reverse psychology of what you say, involving how they were portrayed in this episode in comparison to previous episodes, because Lisa and Lana redesigned the RV in order to have the Lau family to feel comfortable inside a lot more, since they're a big family after all, and they even installed a bedroom exclusively for Lincoln. You know, thinking about how the family is portrayed in this, as much as I didn't like how they were made as plot devices, while being mostly the ones taking the sidelines, even if they may have focus episodes of their own later in this arc, while having Lincoln carry the entire episode, it really feels like that this episode isn't trying to make Lincoln suffer anymore, and the mistake that he did was, in Lincoln's words, an honest mistake. I'm starting to understand onto why they made the episode the way it is, because it really feels like that they want to create their own one rather than rewriting the ones that they did in the past, because they can't be able to do that. No Such Luck, Brawl in the Family, The Greenhouse, Kings of the Con, among others, they know they can't correct all of the ones that they did in the past, especially of how the Loud House movie had poor execution. So they decided to create their own one by having the characters be in a role reversal when it comes to the things that they cannot stand, that are a lot more bigger compared to the insignificant things that they went through, mainly from Brawl in the Family, and try to make them likable. Because, to tell you the truth, if this is literally the only thing that they can do involving the Loud sisters in comparison to how they were portrayed in the Loud House movie, then it's either a good thing, but mostly a sad thing considering of what they told Lincoln towards the end. It really feels like that they didn't entirely mean it, especially how they were how some of them were portrayed in the Taunting Hour. But you also take into consideration that the people behind the Loud House right now, if they do listen to the fans, won't be able to correct the ones that they did in the past. Even if they may be different people, I'm pretty sure that they either just did it their own way, mainly making Season 4 their Season 1, while continuing the series as Season 5 as Season 2, and Season 6 as Season 3, and Season 7 as Season 4. Or it's the fact that they just don't take the show seriously, despite making restrictions along the way. Like, when I say about making a sequel towards my broken character development of Lincoln Loud, I was gonna focus on the other bad episodes, and I may still do that video, just not this year or next year, since I have other plans. But to tell you the truth, when the studio doesn't take this show seriously despite the popularity, which it has been for decades, I honestly can't take anything seriously involving the Loud House because I've seen everything in animation, and the Loud House really felt like one of the last things that I've just experienced. Granted, there are new material to look at, but at the same time, when it comes to impact, the Loud House's impact felt like the lastest impact that I've just witnessed involving animation and how the fan base react to so many things and so many problems involving the later seasons of this show. Like, at this point, the reaction from the fan base, especially when it comes to the dark side of the fan base, it's becoming really old, and even though some of it will never get normalized, it doesn't change the fact that people are hammering in on how bad the fan base got when it came to taking everything a lot more seriously. Like, I do take elements seriously most of the time, but when it comes to the Loud House, there was a reason onto why making a sequel towards the Lincoln Loud video is really important, even if I'm not going to do that project anytime soon. Mainly at the fact that I want to put my own perspective on the episodes in one video rather than just doing a separate review of one of the episodes. So let's get into the ending of this episode. They arrive at Niagara Falls, but they're too late since the barrel race ended, and Rita has to come clean in order to tell Jesse Hiller that they couldn't be able to do a column involving the barrel race itself. But Lincoln decides to take one for the team and tell Jesse Hiller everything that really happened. And Jesse Hiller approves the idea by a landslide in comparison to the barrel race that she wanted, which made me think that with the fantasy elements in this show, I'm surprised that Jesse Hiller isn't surprised that Rita and her family are from Scotland due to the bloodline being related to their ancestors. And to tell you the truth, this is somewhat similar to Lincoln's confession in Kings of the Con. The only difference is that the judges were really unlikable in comparison to Jesse Hiller, and the confession in Kings of the Con were a lot more different in comparison to Lincoln's confession in Bizarritorium. Because even though that Lincoln was honest in Kings of the Con, and even though he somewhat deserves to be not in the movie, it doesn't change the fact that he was highly handicapped. But the difference in Bizarritorium is he wasn't handicapped whatsoever. Even though the characters were plot devices to him, it doesn't change the fact that he wasn't being handicapped. To tell you the truth, for how this episode is executed, this episode felt the same conclusion as how the Loud Sisters get off scot-free when it comes to how they were portrayed in those episodes. Like, Lenny's portrayal in Don't You Forget About Me, the Lucy episode, mainly A Grave Mistake, among others. This really feels similar to those episodes, especially since that Lincoln did a lot worse when it comes to the curse, putting bad luck on his family, and the only reward that he gets is a thank you from his mother. And to be perfectly real with you, it actually feels a lot more accurate here since I've addressed most of the things that makes this episode bizarre. I know I'm not expecting everyone to like this episode, considering that they're gonna be criticizing a lot more when it comes to the fantasy elements and most of the stuff that they may overlook of what I've addressed, but if you really tell me that this episode is the worst episode of Season 7, I disagree. I mean, it's not one of the best of the series, but at the very least, it's somewhat the most decent episodes of Season 7 so far. And considering that the road trip arc has just begun, mainly of how that there's more episodes after this, It really feels like that they wanted to focus on a lot of activities involving the Louds outside of Royal Woods, so that's why they did this road trip arc in the first place. I found this episode bizarrely good, which is something I don't describe for an episode, and if you find anything I say involving this as good advice, go watch my broken character development of Lincoln Loud video that I'm going to include at the end of this video. It may be almost 7 hours long, but believe me, you will understand what I mean after what I said in this. I'm giving this episode a 7.5 out of 10. As for the other road trip episodes, I'm sorry, this is the only road trip episode that I'm gonna be reviewing for right now. Besides, I don't want to make this video longer when it comes to talking about all the road trip episodes, but when it came to the road trip episodes, I didn't watch them yet, but based by the synopsis and the detail in those episodes, I might compare a couple of them to the Cross-Gigantes episodes. Though at the same time, I'm not planning on uploading those videos when they're completed until November, since I've already have everything set up and I'm working on my October schedule with other Loud Tales videos in the works. So here are my couple of ideas. From Brad to Ross to the Hector episode from season 3 where Rosa just dances with a ballet dancer. To tell the truth, T-Doll from season 2 of the Cross-Gigantes is literally the inspiration of what From Brad to Ross got, but to tell you the truth, not only did I compare that episode to Cheetah by the Dozen, but these two episodes involves the husbands trying to get the attention from the wives, and even though Hector isn't doing that whatsoever, it doesn't change the fact that he also wants to get rid of his enemy, which is the same thing that what Lynn is doing in From Bad to Worse. And to be perfectly honest, that's a video I'm highly interested in, and it could possibly be a Cartoon Crisis 3 video if I watch the episodes closely. As for the other ideal, it's Screen Queen and do the fruit shake. Granted, it may be confusing at first, but since it involves big Hollywood stuff and great classical music, it may be different from each other, but it's mainly the main character getting into the big leads, while Lola is getting into the big screen, while Carla is getting into the music industry by getting attention from a popular musician or something, or a record dealer. You may be able to understand where I'm coming from while I'm getting the ideas from these two episodes once I get the chance, but in comparison to the other episode ideal, I might do this comparison ideal way later if I don't see the comparisons completely. Like I said, I know that these aren't really the best comparisons that I have in mind, but at the same time, with more Loud Tales episodes along the way, especially new ones coming in September, there's a chance I might find more ideas along the way from Season 7, especially since they have a planned Season 7 and Season 3 comparison coming next month. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.